Directors meeting for the 25-26 school year. Thank you so much for your patience. I know here we are October 3rd and we're just getting started. We just, some years it happens that way. I'm Adrienne Balcazar, and I'd like to introduce the amazing LCAP State and Federal Programs Unit. Today joining us is Debbie Cano, Helen Choi, Laurel Estrada, Augustine Garcia, Rachel Garcia, and Anita Lomali. I also want to introduce our support staff, Maribel Leyva and, April Grease and Susanna Mendoza. We welcome them. They are our amazing support staff. You might also notice that we are missing one photo bubble. Yes, Jeannie Keith. For those of you that are, were with us last year and the years prior, Jeannie Keith retired in July, and we wish her much happiness in her retirement. To access today's presentation, we ask you to click on the link in the chat. This will take you directly to the slides. If you use the link at the bottom, or if you link there, then you can see the Canvas page and you can access the icons of the presentation, the recordings that we will place on there, and the Q&A. Today's topic on our agenda will be the SPSA or School Plan for Student Achievement Planning Considerations, required notifications in the UCP Parents' Right to Know and 4-week letter. We'll also take a look at the educational rights of homeless children and youth. Then we'll move on to the Title I Part A comparability, FPM, time and effort reporting, Title I capital expenditures and equipment removal, and the LCAP update, looking specifically at posting requirements, the dashboard upload, and our timeline. We welcome your questions, so please place your questions in the chat box, and we will answer any simple questions if we can, but we will follow up with the written responses in a Q&A that will be emailed to each of you. And again, we'll post them on our Canvas page. Before we get started with today's meeting, I did want to invite everyone to, if you're new to us, to be aware that our unit produces and provides and sells the state and federal programs, federal program checklists. And these compliance checklists, when you purchase a subscription, will allow you to receive district level checklists and school level checklists. The district level checklist will provide you with reminders of tasks related to managing a state and federal program, and this issue runs all 12 months. For the school level checklist, this is designed to inform your school site administrators of various state and federal program tasks that need to be accomplished in order to run effective and compliant programs. This issue runs from September through June. You receive both of these checklists via the electronically, and then it will allow you to personalize it with additional reminders that you might want to add to the checklist. The link at the bottom of the slide will take you to our publications web page where you can find the compliance checklist as well as all of our updated publications. We have many binders and resources, and they are all updated now. So we are excited about having the most updated information for all of you. And so now I turn it over to Augustine, who will share some school plan for student achievement planning considerations.
Thank you, Adrienne. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. It's nice to be back with all of you. I hope your school year is off to a great start. So we're going to go ahead and get started today with a school level item that many of you support your site administrators with, and that's the School Plan for Student Achievement, or SPSA. We have 4 objectives for this section this morning. First, we're going to clarify the requirements of the SPSA, which is mandated for schools operating Title I school-wide programs, and those are identified for comprehensive support and improvement, targeted support and improvement, or additional targeted support and improvement, CSI, TSI, and ATSI respectively. Second, we'll explore the alignment between the SPSA and the LCAP as stipulated by Ed Code sections 52062A4 and 52068A4. Third, We'll highlight some best practices for school level planning, emphasizing the importance of data-driven decision-making, educational partner engagement, and strategic goal setting. And we'll conclude this section with resources for the SPSA and school site council, including templates and guided documents. So let's jump right in. The SPSA is a comprehensive school plan required by the Every Student Succeeds Act and also by California Ed Code sections 64001, 65000, and 65001. It's mandatory for schools operating Title I Part A school-wide programs, and like I said, those eligible for CSI, TSI, or ATSI. The plan must address the needs of all students and include strategies to improve academic performance. The SPSA serves as a critical tool for schools to identify areas of need, set measurable goals, and implement targeted actions. It ensures that federal and state funds are used effectively to support student achievement and equity. Charter schools and single school districts may use the LCAP in lieu of the SPSA, provided that all SPSA requirements are incorporated. This flexibility allows for streamlined planning while maintaining compliance. So a link to CDE's guidance for our friends at single school districts and charter schools is included at the bottom of this slide for your reference. So the LCAP and SPSA development processes, they're not mutually exclusive, but instead work in conjunction and inform one another. Alignment between the SPSA and the LCAP is informed by California Ed Code sections 52062A4 and 52068A4. Both plans share the common goal of improving student and school outcomes. Schools are encouraged to align their SPSA planning processes with those at the LEA level, and this can include using both LEA level and school level data to inform their goals, their actions, and their metrics. Consistency in language and processes across plans can strengthen educational partner engagement and can also enhance the effectiveness of planning efforts. So in short, both plans should inform and support each other. By ensuring that both plans reflect shared priorities and strategies, schools can create a cohesive framework for improvement that's responsive to local needs and compliant with state requirements. The SPSA planning process involves a series of structured steps that should be completed in consultation with the school site council. Although there is no legally mandated deadline for SPSA development and approval, it is recommended that the plan be aligned with the LCAP timeline, which requires board adoption by July 1st each year. The planning process includes 9 key steps, which I'll review in the upcoming slide. So each step is designed to ensure that the SPSA is data-driven, inclusive, and focused on continuous improvement. Best practices include ongoing educational partner engagement, using multiple data sources, and aligning school goals with LEA priorities. This structured approach facilitates the development of a robust and effective school plan. Okay, so here are the 9 steps that I referred to on the previous slide. So these 9 steps in the SPSA planning process are intended to be done at the school level. And remember, each step in the school level planning process is required to be completed in consultation with the school site council. So 1, convene your educational partner groups throughout the school year to collect feedback and analyze program implementation, effectiveness, and data. These include your legally required groups, such as your school site council and or your ELAC. And this can also be done during staff meetings, PLCs, and grade level or department meetings. 2, gather and compile data for the LEA, the schools, and student groups from multiple sources, including the California School Dashboard, DataQuest, your SARCs, local indicator data, local assessments, teacher observation reports, and educational partner feedback, just to name a few. 3, evaluate your current SPSA. Use guiding questions to facilitate the evaluation of both the implementation and the effectiveness of the current school year's SPSA. 4, use your data analysis, your root cause identification, educational partner feedback, and the alignment to the LEA's priorities to conduct your comprehensive needs assessment. 5, develop the school goals based on the identified needs using the data and feedback gathered in that comprehensive needs assessment. 6 and 7, identify your metrics and develop your actions to address the identified need, again, using that data and that feedback gathered from that comprehensive needs assessment. Number 8, get your SPSA approved first by the school site council before it's approved by the governing board. And finally, number 9, plan implementation. Again, though Ed Code doesn't specify an annual board approval deadline for the SPSA, it is recommended that the SPSA be board approved prior to the start of the school year to which it applies, and because this allows for the school year to begin with the implementation of the SPSA immediately. Now, that was a lot. So to help with all the information on this slide, we've added a link to a PDF outlining all 9 steps in greater detail. So now let's dive into the SPSA templates themselves. Now in this next series of slides, we're going to take a look at 2 of CDE's SPSA templates, the SPSA only template and the SPSA for TSI template. There are now 4 SPSA templates, and a link to each one is in the arrow pointing to its respective template. It's important to note the CDE does not mandate the SPSA template or any other school level planning template. However, when completed consistent with your instructions, these CDE templates will meet all federal planning requirements. Also, schools still continue to have that flexibility to use a different template to complete the SPSA requirements and the flexibility to address CSI, TSI, and ATSI requirements within the SPSA template. And if an LEA elects to use its own template for school improvement planning for its schools, it must ensure that its template and process both address all federal school improvement planning requirements for CSI, TSI, and ATSI as applicable to the school. And to assist LEAs using an alternative template, the CDE has these linked resources here to ensure federal planning requirements are met. So let's take a look at the SPSA only template. So the SPSA only template consolidates all school level planning efforts into one plan for programs funded through the CONAP pursuant to Ed Code Section 64001 and ESSA. The SPSA only template is intended to be used by Title I school-wide program schools. However, non-Title I schools also have the option to use this template. And the SPSA only template is not required for other state funds, but it may be modified to meet the school's needs. The SPSA only template contains 6 sections that are necessary for meeting school-wide program planning requirements. For those of you who are seasoned vets with the SPSA, this rundown of the sections, it's going to serve as a refresher. But for those of you who might be new to the SPSA world, well, welcome, and consider this a brief introduction to the work at hand. We have the plan description. So here, we briefly describe the school's plan to effectively meet ESSA requirements in alignment with the LCAP and other federal, state, and local programs. Educational partner involvement. This is the ongoing annual process used to involve advisory committees, parents, students, school faculty and staff, and the community in the development of the SPSA and the annual review and update. Comprehensive needs assessment. So when completing this section for a school-wide program, the school shall describe the steps it's planning to take to address the areas of low performance and performance gaps to improve student outcomes. Goals, strategies, activities, and expenditures. Provides a description of the annual goals to be achieved by the school. This section also includes descriptions of the specific planned strategies and activities that a school will take to meet the identified goals, and a description of the expenditures required to implement the specific strategies and activities. And we have annual review. So here we identify any material differences between what was planned and what actually occurred, as well as significant changes in strategies and/or expenditures from the prior year. This annual review and analysis should be the basis for decision-making and updates to your plan. And then there's the budget summary. In this section, a school provides a brief summary of the funding allocated to the school through the CONAP and other funding sources, as well as the total amounts of funds for proposed expenditures described in the SPSA. The budget summary is required for schools funded through the CONAP. So here we have a screenshot of the SPSA for TSI template. I'm going to quickly review the SPSA for TSI template because, as you may know, TSI determinations will be made with the release of the 2025 dashboard on November 13th. This template is designed to meet the school-wide program planning requirements for both the SPSA and federal TSI planning requirements. It's important to note, LEAs with schools that meet that TSI eligibility criteria, well, they're not eligible to receive school improvement funding, and CSI funds shall not be used at or on behalf of schools eligible for TSI. So let's take a look at how TSI planning requirements are met by adhering to those instructions in the template. So to highlight how the instructions and the prompts address TSI requirements, let's take a look at the plan description section of the SPSA for TSI template. In the template, the plan description section prompts the writer to briefly describe the school's plan for effectively meeting the ESSA's planning requirements. It's in alignment with the LCAP and other federal, state, and local programs. We look down on the slide, the instructions also remind the writer to make sure to call out that this plan will be used to meet those TSI requirements. And then here, we have the educational partner involvement section, and we see that adherence to the instructions successfully meets the federal planning requirements for TSI. And as you navigate through the SPSA for TSI template, you'll notice that all the required sections for the SPSA only template are included, but each with their additional TSI planning requirements embedded in the instructions were applicable. And finally, to close out this section, we'd like to share these resources to support you in guiding your LEA schools with their site level planning. So up next is Debbie with our required notifications. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Agustin. Good morning, everyone. So this morning I'm going to review, next slide, 4 different required notifications. And some of these notifications are likely included in your back to school packet of information with other required notifications that parents typically would confirm receiving, but we're going to go over them today. First, we're going to start, next slide, with the Uniform Complaint Procedure Annual Notice. So annually districts are required to share this with all of their educational partners, the students and employees, and what the Uniform Complaint Procedure is. And on our slide, we have the most current sample with a link to this sample for you. Next slide. Another required notification is the Parents' Right to Know letter. This notification is required for LEAs that receive Title I Part A funds. And each LEA receiving these funds must notify the parents of each student attending a school that is receiving the Title I funds that the parents may request the professional qualifications of their student's classroom teacher, and that the district will provide that information upon request in a timely manner. So this notification must also be sent at the beginning of each school year, and we've included a link for the sample from the CDE for this as well. Next slide. Now, this is not an annual notification, but this is called the 4-week letter. And this is also required for schools that are receiving Title I funds. And this notification must be sent in a timely manner, thus the 4-week. And it is when the specific circumstances arise. So this letter is required to be provided to each parent of students who are enrolled in a classroom that has been taught by a teacher who does not meet applicable state certification or licensure requirements at the grade level or the subject area in which the teacher is assigned. And this is for 4 or more consecutive weeks. So if the district knows that a teacher, like a substitute teacher, is in this situation and will be assigned for 4 weeks or more, you should just prepare this letter and be ready to send it at that 4-week mark. This notice only needs to be sent to the parents of the students in that classroom, not school-wide. Next slide, please. So here, this chart highlights that criteria for determining if the 4-week letter is required. Now, as you can see in the chart, if the teachers hold a clear life level 1, level 2, intern, supplementary, or subject matter authorization, or preliminary credential in a grade level or subject area where the teacher is providing instruction, then the 4-week letter is not triggered. However, the 4-week letter is triggered with ineffective or out of field. And I know ineffective doesn't sound nice, but it's just the status that they're using when students are assigned to a teacher who's not credentialed, or their certification or permits don't fall in that category. So this is information is also aligned to the information from the CDE website, where our link can take you for additional information. And next slide, please. And lastly is a notice that is regarding the educational rights of children and youth experiencing homelessness. LEAs are required to ensure that public notices of the educational rights of children experiencing homelessness is disseminated at locations that are frequented by parents and guardians of homeless children and youth, including such places as schools, churches, shelters, public libraries, food pantries, and such. The CDE has these posters, and they are translated into various languages outlining these educational rights that you can download. We've included a screenshot of this poster and a link there on the slide for you. It's also important to note that the LEA must inform school personnel, service providers, advocates working with homeless families and parents of these rights for children who are experiencing homelessness and the duties of the LEA homeless liaison. The list of the liaisons in the LEAs and their contact information must be posted on the LEA's website along with specific information on homelessness, including information of these rights and resources available to persons experiencing homelessness. And that's it for me with the annual notifications.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning, everyone. So in this next section, we're going to review the Title I, Part A comparability requirements. So comparability is one of 3 fiscal tests required under ESSA for recipients of Title I, Part A funds. LEAs receiving Title I, Part A funds must demonstrate that all schools are providing comparable services using state and local funds. And the purpose of this is to ensure that LEAs provide at least the same amount of funding to schools receiving Title I funds as they do to non-Title I schools. And comparability calculations, they must be completed annually at the district level on a school-by-school basis. So to meet comparability requirements, LEAs must file a written assurance with the state and also develop procedures for compliance with comparability requirements and maintain records demonstrating comparability calculations are conducted on an annual basis. When completing these calculations, LEAs must confirm that the student to full-time equivalent teacher ratios fall within a reasonable variance. And in California, this has been determined to be a 30% variance. The written assurance is filed with the state through the spring consolidated application when LEAs complete and submit the certification of assurances form. And so through the certification of this form, LEAs are assuring that they have established and implemented a district-wide salary schedule and policies to ensure equivalence among schools in staffing and in the provision of instructional materials and supplies. And so on this slide, you can see a screenshot of all of the legal assurances that are included in the Spring Con App. And then there's also a link at the bottom of the slide directly to the comparability assurances page. So as mentioned on slide 30, LEAs must develop procedures for compliance with comparability requirements. And so the procedures should include the LEA's timeline and process for demonstrating comparability. Also, it should include the office responsible for completing the calculations, as well as a description of how and when any adjustments are made in schools that are not comparable. And so keep in mind that the procedures, they should be in writing. LEAs must also maintain source documentation to support the annual calculations, as well as any documentation related to any adjustments made to staffing to ensure comparability. And it's required that LEAs maintain this documentation for 3 years after completion of the activity for which the funds were used. However, we recommend maintaining this documentation for 5 years. So LEAs must use student enrollment to full-time equivalent teacher ratios to determine comparability. And these calculations, they can be done in one of 2 ways, either by comparing all schools within the LEA as a whole, or by comparing all schools within the LEA by each grade span group. And as previously mentioned, the student to full-time equivalent teacher ratios, they must fall within a 30% variance. And if schools are not comparable, then the LEA must make adjustments to ensure that all schools are in a comparable position. And so it's recommended that LEAs complete these calculations and make any necessary adjustments in staffing or funding by October 31st of each year. Completing these calculations early enough in the school year will allow the LEA to make any needed adjustments with the least amount of disruption. So LEAs must use the CDE-developed calculation forms to determine comparability. And these forms are in Excel format and provide LEAs with immediate information on whether or not a school is comparable. When completing the forms, LEAs need to enter the school name, school type, grade span group code, student enrollment, and total full-time equivalent teachers for all schools included in the school student counts report in CARS. The last two columns of the form will auto-populate based on the student enrollment and FTE teacher information that's entered. And then the last column will indicate whether or not the school is comparable. If you calculate comparability based on one method, such as the LEA-wide average, and find that a school is not comparable, it's then recommended that you try the other option. So that would be the grade span group average to determine comparability. If a school is still not comparable after trying both options, then the LEA would need to make adjustments to meet the requirements. When completing these calculations, remember to capture the student enrollment data and full-time equivalent teacher data on the same date for every school within the LEA. Also remember to maintain source documentation that this data is captured on the same date. Another important reminder is that the calculations should only include teachers whose salaries are paid using state and local funds. So for example, if you have teachers who are split funded, you would calculate the FTE using only the percentage of the salary that's paid with state or local funds. The calculation forms, as well as instructions and other related resources, can be found on the CDE website at the link provided at the bottom of the slide. When determining comparability, there are also several exclusions that LEAs may use. So first off, LEAs are not required to include any unpredictable changes that occur after the beginning of the school year, such as changes in student enrollment or personnel assignments. LEAs may also exclude schools with 200 or less students from the calculations. And also, if the LEA is a single school LEA or only has one school for each grade span group, then the comparability requirement does not apply. LEAs may also exclude state or local funds expended for language instruction programs and the excess cost of providing services to students with disabilities. And lastly, the LEA may exclude state and local funds expended under ESSA for programs that meet the intent and purposes of Title I, Part A. Then there are also several school types that are exempt from meeting comparability requirements. And so this includes alternative schools of choice, continuation high schools, county community schools, district community day schools, juvenile court schools, opportunity schools, public special education schools, and also youth authority schools. And just keep in mind when completing the CDE calculation forms, the last two columns of the form will automatically indicate exempt if the school has 200 or less students, or if it's one of the school types that are listed as exempt. So here is an example of a completed comparability form based on the LEA-wide average. In the last column, you can see that middle school A is not comparable. So if a school is not comparable, you would then try the grade span group average option to see if it meets comparability that way. What's nice about these calculation forms is that once you enter the information in the LEA-wide average tab, it will auto-populate for you that same data for each school into the grade span group average tab. So you won't have to re-enter the information in each tab. Another thing that I just would like to highlight in this example is that 2 schools are exempt as indicated in the last 2 columns. So you can see elementary school C is exempt because it has less than 200 students. And high school B is exempt because it is a continuation high school. So again, the form will auto-populate the last 2 columns with exempt if the school meets one of the school type exemptions or has 200 or less students. So here is another example, and this one is based on the grade span group average. And you can see it has the same elementary and middle school data that was included on the previous slide. And so the first screenshot shows the elementary grade span group, and the second shows the middle school grade span group. So you can see that by using the grade span group average calculation, middle school A is now comparable. So in this example, it worked out for middle school A using the grade span group option. However, if a school is still not comparable after trying both options, then the LEA would need to make adjustments in order to meet comparability requirements. So as a reminder, comparability requirements are monitored through the FPM process, specifically under item 14 in the Compensatory Education Program instrument. And so evidence requests for this item include the completed comparability of services calculation forms, the current district-wide salary schedule, the LEA's policy to ensure equivalence among schools and teachers, administrators, and other staff, and also the LEA's policy to ensure equivalence among schools in the provision of curriculum materials and instructional supplies. So if your LEA receives Title I Part A funds, it will be important to verify that your LEA has these required policies and procedures in place and is also annually completing the required calculations, and then making any necessary adjustments if any schools are not comparable. And so that concludes this section. So I will now turn it over to Adrian.
Thank you, Rachel. Now let's talk about federal program monitoring. When you accept federal funds, you sign assurances that you will follow the legal requirements of the program. So my question to you is, do you know the purpose of the programs that you have in your organization? In these 4 title programs, the main purpose is to increase student achievement and provide a fair, equal, high-quality education for all students. Each of these programs targets specific student groups or aspects of a student's education. And so it's important to know the purpose of each of these title programs, because this is the why we do what we do. The implementation of your federal programs is dependent on your timeline. Having a timeline is critical, and because this guides the activities at the district level as well as the site level. Knowing when does the planning, implementing, and monitoring and evaluating take place for each of these programs is critical in making sure that you are abiding by all the legal requirements. And secondly, is everyone in your district and the schools aware of these timelines? If you don't have clear timelines, if you do have clear timelines, then everyone will see these as activities of the federal program and not a pot of money that needs to be spent. Again, remember that all of these federal programs are focused on students. As you are monitoring and evaluating your federal programs as part of your process, the CDE also has the responsibility to review your federal programs. This is called the Federal Program Monitoring Review, also known as FPM. And the purpose of the FPM review is to ensure that you are spending the federal funds as required by law. So this is the FPM cycle you can see here, and it's scheduled by school year. As shown, for each LEA, the cycle is every 2 years, showing it online and on site. All of the LEAs in the state are placed in one of the four groups or cohorts, A, B, C, and D. And so for this 25-26 school year, Cycle B is up for the online review and Cycle D is up for an on-site review. Those of you that have been identified, you were informed and you have been, able to start working and gathering all your evidence. So for this year, the LEAs that have been selected on the next slide are highlighted in yellow. And you can see how the state groups the LEAs by regions, such as the Foothill LEAs or the Southwest LEAs. And again, this is in LA County. So you can see that cohort B has eight, I believe eight. And then the cohort D has three. If you're selected for an online review, you will be uploading your evidence into the CMT. So on the next slide, we see the table here that identifies the different components of the FPM review. So if you're on site, then you are uploading your information of your evidence as well as you have in-person activities that take place. If you're online, then you're just uploading your information again to the CMT, which is the California Monitoring Tool. And this is a system that CDE uses to review the evidence that has been uploaded and up for review. On the next slide, here are the programs for the 25-26 FPM reviews that the LEA might be selected for review. And I want to point out that there is a new instrument that's been added. It's the Comprehensive Sexual Health Education, the CSHE. And so that is, again, a new instrument that's been included for this school year. So please make sure that you are familiar with this and that you understand what evidence needs to be collected in order to be compliant with this particular program. And so currently, the only way to access the 25-26 FPM program instruments is through CDE's box. I checked late last night and I still don't see the 25-26 instruments posted on the compliance webpage. So please use this link at the bottom of this slide and you will be able to access all of the programs and all this information that was shared during the September 25-26 virtual FPM training. And in the box, you will find folders that for each program that is being reviewed this year. And again, we want everyone to take a look in there and, mark this as your perhaps, in your browser to make sure that you constantly take a look at this. They periodically will add additional samples or different, resources that are updated. So you definitely want to keep this at your, close at hand. And so again, you will find all of the instruments in each of these folders for the respective program. So as I conclude with this section, I always like to ask the districts at the beginning of the year to reflect on your own federal programs, specifically for this school year. Are you implementing compliant programs? Are there areas that you need to improve or you need to refine? Again, because you don't want to have collecting the evidence as seen as a once a year kind of thing. You want to have systems in place. So do you have strong systems in place? It shouldn't be dependent on a person. It should be something that is a process that everyone knows about, everyone follows, and it's constantly followed. So, and then also, does your procedures include an organized framework that everyone is knowledgeable about, and two, they've been trained in it. So again, it's not dependent on one person. And so if you do not have compliant programs, then take a look and reflect on what specific student needs are not being met. And maybe that's the best place to start in terms of looking at your systems and focusing and prioritizing what part of your federal program do you need to start and then continue on with looking at all of your systems and fortifying them for compliant programs. And so again, as you look forward this year, what changes can you make to the implementation of your federal programs? So again, we wish you, a great school year with FPM and all those systems. And now Anita will continue with sharing about time and effort reporting.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Adrienne. So as mentioned in the previous slide, a key component of ensuring successful MPM reviews, whether that's this year or sometime in the future, is having systems and procedures that are known to all the relevant parties, utilized consistently, and monitored by the LEA. Now, one of the systems that is often reviewed in an FPM and is often identified as a finding is time and effort. So let's review some of the key elements. So time and effort reporting, who does it? Federal regulations require time and effort documentation for all personnel who receive any payment or compensation from a federal fund in part or in whole. So whether it's 1 penny or an entire salary, anyone paid with federal funds is required to report their time and effort compensated by the grant. Time and effort reporting is in addition to any other documentation that the LEA might require of their employees, such as a time card. Now, please note that although we usually think of time and effort reporting as a requirement for only federal funds or grants, state restricted funds such as ELOP funds also follow federal time and effort reporting requirements. So time and effort reporting, why do we do it? Well, in a nutshell, it's the law. In the Code of Federal Regulations, Title II, Section 200.403A, any employee funded by a federal grant must maintain documentation showing that their time and effort is necessary, reasonable, and allocable to their respective federal program. Now, allocation is an accounting term that basically means that costs charged to a specific program or a cost objective are based on the benefit to the program. Essentially, if a cost is directly associated with or provides a tangible benefit to the federal project, it can be deemed allocable to that program. Also, LEAs must ensure that all salaries and wages charged to the federal programs are based on records that accurately reflect the work performed and are supported by a system of internal control. It's this system of internal control that provides reasonable assurance to the entity providing the funds, which in this case is the federal government, that the charges are accurate and allowable and properly allocated. So why does reporting of time and effort, so what does it look like? So although we often say time and effort as if it were one long word, right? Time and effort, it's helpful to separate the two words and think of them as such. It's your time and your effort. When thinking about time, we should be thinking about like a begin time and end time supported by a daily schedule. Time on one program or grant can begin and end, and then time on another grant can begin and end within the same day. The hours or amount of time are documented on official records sheets, such as a personnel activity report, a semi-annual certification, or a blanket certification, and more to come on those reports in the upcoming slides. Effort is all about the work being done and how that supports the federal grant or program. The effort is documented in duty statements in addition to job descriptions. Now, the required duty statement is not only more specific than a job description, but the specific duties an employee is entrusted to carry out as part of the federal grant ensures allowability, accuracy, and proper allocation. So when documenting time on a federal grant, it's critical to define and understand the accounting term of cost objective. Now, as defined by the Code of Federal Regulations, Title II, Part 200.1, A cost objective is a program, a function, an activity, an award, an organizational subdivision, a contract, or a work unit for which cost data are desired. Now, cost data are factual information concerning the cost of labor, the cost of material, the cost of overhead, and the other cost elements which are expected to be incurred by the contractor in performing the contract. So in our case, these costs are those incurred by the LEA carrying out the intent of the federal grant awarded through the consolidated application. So in practical terms, a cost objective is anything for which your LEA or the grantor will want to measure separately. So there are two, next slide, there are two types of cost objectives. We have a single cost objective and a multiple cost objective. And when trying to understand these terms, it helped me to think more of them as the term objective rather than the word cost. So a single cost objective is a set of work activities where both the services being performed and the populations being served are allowable under each of the programs or grants supporting the cost objective. The position or activity worked is dedicated to a singular purpose or a singular objective. If this criteria is met, then this set of work activities of a staff member is considered a single cost objective. And even though it may be funded from more than one grant or award, hence the little icon here of different circles, they're all circles, maybe different colors, but they're all circles. Now, a multiple cost objective is when an employee works on more than one award and the activities performed may not be considered a single cost objective, or the purpose of the objectives in the tasks is varied. It can also be a multiple cost objective when the employee works on multiple federal awards, a federal award and a non-federal award, or a direct or an indirect activity. It can also be when a staff serves different student populations funded by the different programs and grants. And here with this little icon, they're all shapes, but they're all different shapes, and all the shapes are different colors too. So let's take a look at some examples of a single cost objective focusing on the word objective. So you have an instructional coach or a paraprofessional who is funded with Title I funds. Because these employees work on one type of activity or purpose, supporting eligible students in core content academic areas, and are funded by one grant, their work is considered a single cost objective. Now, in the case of an instructional coach who is funded by two different grants, but all of the tasks performed by the instructional coach in that role are allocable to both grants, then it's considered to be a single cost objective as well. A cafeteria cook has a singular objective, which is to prepare meals for students that meet guidelines and are nutritious. Although the cook may be funded from several grants or funds such as the National School Federal Lunch Program, a state reimbursement grant, and local funds, because the tasks and activities are allocable to each of the funds, they too are working under a single cost objective or a singular purpose. A multiple cost objective is when the objective of the work is varied, where all tasks are not allocable to an award or perhaps all funding sources. It is when the employee works on one or more award and the activities performed may not be considered a single cost objective. So in this example, a teacher on special assignment plans your family workshops, supports new teachers, translates family documents, plans and organizes the ELAC or the DLAC meetings. All of these activities may not be allocable under each of the various federal grants. It is possible that some of these tasks are allocable under a couple of grants, but not all of them. So for example, a task related to planning DLAC meetings may be allocable under LCFF, but not Title I or Title II. Planning workshops might be allocable under LCFF and Title I, but not Title II. And supporting new teachers may be allocable under LCFF, Title I, and Title II. But nevertheless, because all of the tasks are not allocable under all of the grants, this person's time and effort is reported under multiple cost objectives. Now, a word to the wise, if ever you are in doubt, if activities or tasks in a person's duty statement serves a single cost objective or a multiple cost objective, it's more prudent to report that person's time and effort under multiple cost objectives. So another document that is required for time and effort reporting is a position control report or document. A PCR ensures that the allocated funds from the grant are used appropriately to hire and maintain a designated workforce for the grant, preventing overspending on personnel costs and demonstrating clear accountability to the Department of Ed and CDE. Now, PCR must include the employee's full name, the position title in its entirety, location of position or its department, the funding source or sources if more than one, the percentage of each funding source as applicable, the hours of the position or its full-time equivalency, FTE, and if the position is funded using Title I funds, you can indicate the 85-15% rule and the allowable reservations. Are the services being paid for direct, 85%, or indirect services for students, which would be your 15%. Once a position control document or report is placed for the position funded by the federal award, whether in part or whole, you are ready to set the additional documents in motions. Yes, there are additional documents. So now for the certifications. The type of documentation required for certification of time and effort is determined by the cost objective of the position. So employees who work solely on a single federal award or a single cost objective need only to complete a periodic semi-annual certification. The periodic certification must be prepared at least semi-annually or twice a year, be signed by the employee or the supervisory official having firsthand knowledge of the work performed, and state that the employee works solely on that single federal program or single cost objective during the period covered by the certification. Now, employees who work on multiple activities or multiple cost objectives, of which at least one funding source requires time and effort accounting, must complete a personnel activity report or an equivalent documentation. PARs or equivalent documentations must reflect an after-the-fact distribution of the actual activity of each employee, account for the total activity for which each employee is compensated, be prepared at least monthly and coincide with one or more pay periods, and be signed by the employee. And just when you think all of the paperwork is done, there's one more thing, and that's reconciliation. At the onset, LEAs may estimate the budget and the percentages and hours per employee required to complete and submit time and effort reporting. But remember that although budget estimates may be used for interim accounting purposes, budget estimates alone do not qualify as support for charges to federal funds. Make certain to make time periodically and systematically to compare budgeted distributions with actual costs based on the monthly activity reports. And a best practice is to do this at least quarterly. All necessary adjustments must be made such that the final amount charged to the federal award is accurate, allowable, and properly allocated. Your internal control system must include a process for the after-the-fact review of reports. We all start off with good intentions, but then things change, things happen, and you need to reconcile them. Now we've gone over a bit with time and effort, so let's close out with a summary. The bottom line for time and effort reporting can be summarized with the following major points. Any employee paid with any amount of federal funds or required from a state program must keep accurate records to support time and effort benefiting the federal or the state restricted fund. The LEA must have a written procedure in place describing how this will take place in the LEA. Where are the forms found? When are they completed? When are they submitted? And who are they submitted to? And who checks them? All employees paid from more than one source and cost objective require a more detailed reporting. And the difference between the actual time and effort reported and the original budgeted amounts must be reconciled so that the work and reports match up as closely as possible. And remember that because this involves salaries and benefits, compliance findings for time and effort can result in significant payback of funds. Okay, up next is Laurel.
Thank you, Anita. All right, so now we'll go over the requirements related to prior approval for capital expenditures as well as equipment removal for Title I. It's a best practice to double check that these procedures are understood by all and that they are followed and documented consistently. So let's start by reviewing what is a capital expenditure that would require prior federal approval before purchasing. Title I federal program guidelines classify this as any single non-expendable item of personal property with a useful life exceeding 1 year and an acquisition cost of $10,000 or more. As a reminder, last year the threshold increased from $5,000. The $10,000 threshold for prior written approval excludes taxes, shipping, and installation costs. So let's now go over how to get that prior written approval, once again, to purchase single items valued at more than $10,000 using Title I funds. You must submit the Title I Part A or Part D capital expenditure form to CDE along with a detailed vendor quote. Delays can be prevented by double checking that requests meet Title I Part A funding purpose and program requirements, which of course we all know are to provide all children significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education and to close the educational achievement gaps. So let's review the request submission process. As I mentioned, all capital expenditure equipment requests must include a complete expenditure request form and the vendor quote when submitting. You only need to submit one quote from the vendor that you will be using to supply the equipment. As the Title I grantee, it is your responsibility to do the research on the best price, model, and vendor to purchase the equipment. If you have questions about a vendor or type of equipment, you can always contact CDE ahead of time. Once again, the prior written approval request for equipment purchase must meet the purpose of Title I funding and program requirements, which are referenced here in this slide. Here we have an example of a completed capital expenditure request for pre-approval. Be sure to fill out all 3 pages of the form completely. Make sure that no responses are left blank. Use NA, not applicable, or use 0 or the number 0 for dollar amounts for one or more lines that do not apply to your request. Even if your request is for multiple pieces of equipment for one school or facility, only one form needs to be completed. The vendor quote should indicate multiple pieces of equipment for that one location. On the other hand, if a vendor quote is for multiple pieces of equipment and multiple schools or facilities, each school site will need an expenditure form completed. The request form and vendor quote must align, otherwise CDE will email to request clarification. Make sure that you submit the fully completed capital expenditure form along with the vendor quote at the same time. Since we're all eager to receive our equipment just as soon as possible, here are some common reasons for delays that should be avoided. We wouldn't want to have incomplete forms, or mismatched information between the form and the vendor quote, or vague descriptions. Remember, zero and not applicable should be used rather than leaving a response blank. Sometimes after all this, the request is denied. In those instances, the LEA will receive both an email and a formal letter from CDE stating the reason or reasons. Typically, denials are caused by misalignment of the purchase with the purpose of Title I funding. Sometimes the school requesting the purchase is not actually eligible for Title I Part A funds. That's a problem. It could be that the request is not deemed reasonable, necessary, or allocable. As a general rule, funds cannot be used for items such as signage, storage buildings, or construction. Documentation of the denial should be kept on file for future audits or FPM reviews. So, you've met all the requirements and your request is approved. Now what? You'll receive both an email and a formal letter letting you know the purchase is approved. That notification will contain instructions for keeping the email, formal approval letter, and vendor quotes on file, again, for future audits or FPM reviews. It's also important to immediately update your historical inventory records to include the item or items. Since compliance with reporting requirements doesn't end with approval, now we'll go on to how we take care of it when we engage in the removal process. When it comes to removing equipment, you must also get prior written approval. And you use the Title I equipment removal form to do this, along with any required reports, such as a police report or an administrator report. All Title I purchased equipment, regardless of dollar amount, so this differs from the prior written approval for purchasing equipment. This applies to any equipment purchased using Title I funds, must be reported prior to removal from the school facility or program sites. Each equipment form must be fully completed by the site where the equipment was located and approved by CDE before the equipment can be removed. If equipment is damaged or broken, an administrator report must also be submitted with the equipment removal form. If the equipment is lost, stolen, or missing, a police report and an administrator report must be submitted with the equipment removal form. On the next two slides, we'll take a look at a sample equipment removal form. This form can be used for either Title I Part A or Part D, and you can use the drop-down menu to select one. Again, thoroughness is crucial when completing this form. Don't leave any blanks. And e-signatures, either directly on the PDF or via DocuSign, are allowed. Continuing with the removal form, be sure that one item per line is included with the equipment ID number or asset tag, the funding source, the purchase date, the cost, the trade-in value, and finally, the reason for removal. Remember that if the reason for removal is that the equipment is damaged, an administrator's report is required. If an item is lost, missing, or stolen, both an administrator report and a police report are required. In your email submission, indicate the name of the school or facility or program sites that the equipment is being removed from. Make sure that the supplemental documentation is included with the completed equipment removal form. To prevent delay in approvals, do not send the documents separately. If your forms are returned to you for more information needed, try to respond as soon as possible so that the process is not delayed. Once your equipment removal form has been approved and signed off by the CDE, you can remove, transfer, sell, e-waste, trash, or trade in the equipment. Keep all copies of your requests on hand with any supporting documentation, again, for audit and or FPM purposes. Finally, to make sure you update your historical equipment inventory to reflect removals that are approved by the CDE. And on this slide, we simply have a sample supporting document. In this case, it's a police report for an item that might be stolen, missing, or lost. The incident report from the police should contain the LEA name and address, the date of the incident and report, as well as the school, facility, program name, and address. To finish up, all forms related to equipment purchased with Title I Part A funds can be found at the CDE Title I Capital Expenditure webpage, which is linked to this slide. Staying on top of these procedures will save you the headache of a backlog later, and establishing effective systems for documentation will support you in preparation for audits and FPM reviews. And now I will hand it off to Helen for some LCAP updates.
Thank you, Laurel. Hello and happy Friday. Can you believe it? I can't believe that it's already time to start discussing the timeline about preparation for the 26-27 LCAP. Yes, that's right. We're already beginning. So today I'll be reviewing the requirements for the remainder of the 25-26 LCAP and sharing a resource to guide you through the 26-27 LCAP timeline. So let's get started. So we'll start with the 25-26 LCAP posting requirements. As a reminder, remember, the LCAP should be posted as a single document containing all the required components in the following order. First, the budget overview for parents, the 25-26 LCAP, which includes the plan summary, engaging educational partners, goals and actions, the increased or improved services sections, and the action tables, and of course, the LCAP template instructions. So school districts must post on their homepage any approved LCAPs along with all updates, revisions, or addenda, including federal compliance. And they must also post or link all LCAPs from charter schools they authorize, again, including any updates. Similarly, charter schools are required to post on their own homepage any adopted LCAP. So please note that all previously approved LCAPs must also be posted prominently on the LEA's homepage. So to assist you in meeting the posting requirements found in the Ed Code Section 52065, you can find any and all adopted and approved LCAPs by the following steps provided on this slide. Once you arrive at laco.edu, you will want to click on the LCAPs at the top of the page. And once on the Los Angeles County LCAPs page, you'll see 3 different buttons containing the approved plans from all prior LCAP cycles available for you to download. And I'm also excited to share with you that all 79 districts in LA County now have approved LCAPs. So they are now available for you to access on our eLCAP system. And another requirement, for the 2025 California dashboard upload, each LEA, whether school district, charter school, or a county office of education, we must upload a PDF of the governing body adopted or county office approved 25-26 LCAP as required by the Ed Code. So the upload window will be open from October 13th through October 31st. It's coming up soon. So please plan to complete your submissions within this window. The CDE will provide additional information and instructions on how to upload the approved LCAP to the 2025 dashboard coordinate and the 2025 dashboard will be sent to the dashboard coordinators or the main authorizers. So be sure to sign up through the MyCDE Connect if you have not done so already. And if you need support, you can also reach out to LACO's Assessment and Data Literacy Unit by emailing Dan, D-A-A-N, at laco.edu. So let's talk about now our upcoming LCAP. So LCAP season is kind of like pumpkin spice season, right? It comes around every year and somehow everyone gets excited for it. Yay! Okay, so here we are. Here is a timeline that is, of course, not inclusive of everything. During the implementation phase in the fall, LEAs established the PAC or the Parent Advisory Committee, and if applicable, the EL Parent Advisory Committee or Student Advisory Committees. They developed a process and timeline for LEA leadership and principals to share the LCAP at school sites so parents, staff, and students understand how the plan supports their schools. This phase also includes implementing actions and monitoring expenditures and data to determine effectiveness. And during the analysis phase in the winter and early spring, LEAs continue to consult with educational partners, including parents, students, and teachers and staff, on the implementation status, outcomes, expenditure data, including the LCFF carryover. Input from partners informs the goal analysis and planning for the next LCAP year. So LEAs also present the mid-year update to the governing board by February 28th of 2026. In the LCAP development phase in the spring, the LEAs use their analysis and partner input to inform the 26-27 LCAP draft. The draft is shared with the required education partners and is also presented to the PAC and LELPAC for comments, in which the superintendent also responds in writing. LEAs also notify the public the opportunities to submit written comments and provide follow-up trainings for educational partners, staff, and the advisory committees. So the one resource that we have available for you today is the 25-26 LCAP timeline here, and it's linked on this slide. This document includes considerations and reflection section with guiding questions to help an LEA leadership team and cabinet plan a meaningful and transparent LCAP process. Each section of the timeline also includes board updates to keep the board informed about the 25-26 goals and the systems for monitoring implementations and expenditures. And again, remember that in the fall, LEAs should also establish the required committees. And across all phases, the timeline identifies strategies for oversight and support related to actions, expenditures, and effectiveness, as well as engaging educational partners and the governing board or the body. So as LEAs map out their LCAP process, it's important to remember that the local indicators and the LCAPs are presented together when the plan is adopted by the board towards the end of the year. This date should be established early to ensure the timeline fully engages educational partners and the board throughout the implementation, the goal analysis, and the plan development. Develop a timeline for the 26-27 LCAP leading to the board adoption. Includes a process for reporting the year 2 outcome data from the 25-26 LCAP and continue actions addressing disparities from the 2023 dashboard and create a process to collect evidence for the 25-26 local indicators. This backwards mapping process will support a more strategic and coordinated approach to resource allocation, educational partner engagement, and continuous improvement in student outcomes. So our closing slide on this section provides the dates for CDE's LCAP training, which will begin in early November. The webinars are scheduled for Tuesdays at 2 p.m. and Thursdays at 3 p.m. So hopefully that's easy to remember. There are 9 sessions in total running from early November through mid-December. The topics and the registration links are included on this slide. And flashing news that you have been waiting for. So CDE released the 2023-24 Teacher Assignment Monitoring Outcome, or the TAMO data on DataQuest last week. This data will populate the priority 1 local indicator on the 2025 dashboard. So remember, LEAs must present it to their governing board as a non-consent item, consistent with other local indicators that were presented before July 1st with the LCAP. A sample board item is available on our Canvas page, and it's also linked on this slide. And as our final slide, we have some reminders for our upcoming deadlines. October is a busy month. The Title III English Learner Program Annual Report is due on October 8th at 5 p.m. Title III Immigrant Student Program Annual Online Report for the 24-25 school year is due on November 12th by 5 p.m. Federal Stimulus Reporting for LEAs with liquidation extension closes on October 10th. CSI LEA reporting for both 2023 and 2024 funds is due on October 31st. And as mentioned earlier, the LCAP dashboard upload window is opening from October 13th through October 31st. And the federal cash management data collection for reporting period 2 is also due on October 31st, even if your balance is 0. And looking ahead, CalPAT's fall submissions are open from October 1st through January 23rd, with certifications due on December 12th and any amendments due on January 23rd. And thank you. And that concludes our presentation today. We're going to give you a little gift of time. We thank you for joining us today. And please take your time to provide us with any feedback. The link is dropped in the chat. We do review the feedback and we'll use it for our future items and suggestions. And we truly appreciate any feedback that you can provide for us. And if you have any last minute questions, please do place them in the chat. And our next meeting is on Thursday, November 20th, so please join us. And we may see some of you at CASFEP later this month. So thank you again for joining us today and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.